Peace and blessings to my sisters and brothers. It's a beautiful day in Seattle. I'm going to go ahead and get on with the title of this video. It's called Yemoja, Olokun, and the Mysteries of Water. But first, I'd like to give thanks and praise to my ancestors, teachers, and guides, those who are in this physical plane, as well as those on the other side. I give thanks and praise to all the Egun, all the Orishas. I give thanks and praise to Olodumare. I give thanks and praise to the spiritual forces and the spiritual guides called Egbe who have led me to where I'm at now. I give thanks and praise to all the sublime heavenly beings within and around us and throughout the universe. Say Alafia, peace, blessings, Hotep, and all those other beautiful greetings in which we address each other with. So when we talk about water, and believe me, I'm over here in the city of Seattle, and there's plenty of it. It's all around us. In fact, they say that Seattle is a pretty rainy city. So you're not getting away from the element of water here. However, many think that water is the yielding force. And water is the most adaptable of the elements. It goes from a solid, right? Actually, it goes from a liquid, right? A solid, a gas, and all those. It's very adaptable. It can match whatever container it is in, right? And take on its form. It's most adaptable of all the elements. And this is what led to masters like Bruce Lee saying, "Be like water, my friend." And according to the Kemetic wisdom keeper known as Abdul Hakim, who is in spirit, he also told us before he left this physical plane to study water. There's also a book called The Body's Many Cries for Water, right? And on it says, you're not sick, you're thirsty. So water is a very powerful medicine. You can't live without water. Now in African traditions, water is so important to working with spirit. In the Ifa tradition, the Holy Odu Ofunbile, it teaches us that water made a sacrifice, and that sacrifice was accepted. And as a reward, the sacrifice made water to be so powerful that a swift end will come to the enemies of water. Therefore, water is to be respected. We bathe with water, we cook with water, we drink with water, we eat with water. We pray with water. We have all kinds of rituals with water. In West Africa, the Europe in particular, we see that is one of the most, or maybe a few of their most recognized deities. Like these are spirits of water, like Yemoja, who is called the mother of fish. Olokun, the owner of the ocean. Yemoja is said to have an underwater palace of great wealth, and Olokun is the keeper of the words, that is, the keeper of the world's deepest secret. Yemoja is said to have been married to Orumela, the spirit of divination and a prophet of the system that is Ifa. And it was Orumela who passed Yemoja the divination system called Meridian Lagoon, and it's a system of 16 cowrie shells used to divine. So, by the way, she actually obtained this from Orumela, who in turn obtained these cowrie shells from Olokun, the owner of the ocean. Now these deities are called Orishas, right? Orisha has been translated to mean quite a few things. Orisha has been translated to mean select head, so forth, seated consciousness, among other things. But there's no escape from the use of water, right? When it comes to ceremonies and numerous ways in which the Yoruba and West African people contact spirit. So water is like a telephone, to say the least. It is a telephone to the spirit world. And this way, there are libations along with prayers. Meditate on this, experiment accordingly. Get you some water and just meditate with a bowl of water and gaze into the water and see how it makes you feel. Now, according to the Yorubas, water also made a pact with Olodumare. Now, Olodumare is basically God in Yoruba belief. Olodumare has been translated by my teacher to mean the everlasting Odu that constantly move forward. Odu are actually containers of existence, life, wombs, and so forth. And these Odus are the patterns in which we tap into when we're reading the destiny of another person, right? We'll talk about that in another video. Anyway, It is water that keeps things cool. It is water that cooled down creation. When it first started out, it's like a ball of fire, making it suitable for life. So like I said earlier, water is a very powerful medicine. In fact, listening to the movement of waves, waterfalls, and the trickling of a stream all have significant benefits to the human life force. And today, more and more sisters and brothers are becoming aware of spiritual beings such as Yemoja, Oshun, Olokun, Mami Wata, Nomo, etc. So in surviving African traditions, it is believed that there is a special relationship between water and spirit. Even in the Christian tradition, water is used in the rite of baptism, signifying the rebirth and the washing away of sins, where the individual is now reborn and can now receive the Holy Spirit. In African traditions, one of the most common methods around is the use of water in the form of libation. And this is more than just a symbolic gesture. Practitioners from various African traditions take water and pray into the water, and then they pour the water into the earth. And this is after the water has been imprinted with the intent of the one doing the libation. So many say that this is quenching the thirst of the ancestors who have been buried in the earth. And there's more to this. When we pour water into the earth, our prayers and intent charges up the whole area where the intent is directed. According to ancient Kemet, it talks about the primordial ocean. All rose from out of the Nun. The Nun is the cosmic ocean of nothingness, and Nun is said to be the parent of all the Neteru. The Neteru are the deities, aka gods of ancient Kemet. So when we look at water, we're seeing the same water that has been in the bodies of individuals for thousands of years, the same waters that has been drank by the pharaohs, the warriors, healers, and priests for thousands of years. And within these waters remain their memories. So water may be the most mysterious element known to man since the beginning of time. However, its very nature is mysterious, fluid, and all carbon life must have it in order to exist. So it is believed by the ancients that everything in existence emerged from the primordial waters of nothingness. And we can find this in the scriptures and traditions around the globe. And the Kamishas believe that life-sustaining fires of Ra came directly out of the Nun. The Hindus talk about Vishnu emerging from the Sea of Milk. And we see that the rivers where many of these civilizations were established pay reverence to the various rivers, such as the Nile, the Niger, the Ganges, the Jordan, the Tigris, the Euphrates, and so on. So in the tradition of Mami Wata, we learn about the various water spirits, including mermaids, right? And you'll see that Yemoja is also identified with a mermaid. The Nile Valley, Abrahamic, and West African traditions all agree that the world started out as a watery mass. The Bini and the Yoruba call this watery mass Olokun's kingdom. And Olokun is the owner of the ocean. Olokun, owner of the sea as well. And in the Edo state of Benin, he is seen as a king, or as the king of the waters. He is the first son of Osanabwa, the Edo name for the supreme being, who, in like the Yoruba, Olodumare, is basically the one in which all the other deities emanated from, and is considered the most important deity within the Edo pantheon. The colors of Olokun, according to the Edo people, are white. However, red coral is also sacred to Olokun, and he is also connected to the mudfish. The mudfish symbolizes peace and prosperity, as well as the ability to adapt to water and land. So in the case of the mudfish, it represents the unification of the two. Olokun is the owner of wealth, a great keeper of knowledge and wisdom. The Edo believe that Olokun resides beneath the Ethiopia River. Olokun must be appeased so that the spirits of the deceased can be guided in and out of the spirit realm. Money, wealth, offspring, undiscovered truths, and that which is beyond the unexplainable are all sacred to Olokun. Olokun is a healer of those who have been through psychic trauma. So Olokun does a lot. For those who want to have children, they also go to Olokun as well as Yemoja. So in every culture, Water is understood as a powerful yet mysterious force, including the Congo mysteries. The ocean is known as the Great Kalunga because it is also the residence of departed spirits. Olokun also deals with the departed. Now, the Greek philosopher Thales, who also studied in ancient Kemet before starting his own school, believed that the world started with water. And when you look at history, you will see that a lot of your greatest civilizations developed around the water. And it should tell you that the element is of very special significance. Yes, we have an African understanding of an underwater kingdom. We have our form of Atlantis as well. So we call it Olokun's kingdom. It is the Atlantis sunk into the depths, which is also part of Olokun's kingdom. Olokun is to West Africa what Poseidon was to the Greeks. Kalunga is a Kikongo word. The Great Kalunga, the threshold between the worlds. Let us call our ancestors out of the water. The souls of millions are under the waters. The bottom of the ocean is an ancestral domain. So when we observe the Memphite theology, as well as Anu theology, we see that in Kemet, there were different ways of understanding all things emerging from the primordial waters of nothingness. This includes Atum, who is said to have risen from the primordial waters, who is followed by Apep, who seeks to devour him and bring him back into that state of nothingness. And it should be clear concerning the universal story of power of water throughout many ancient and modern cultures worldwide. One very important icon that continues to be addressed is what is called the Primordial Egg of Creation. Now, in the Hindu tradition, it talks about Hiranyagarbha, the golden egg within the primordial waters or ocean. It is this egg that released the four elements, earth, wind, fire, and water. Also, from this egg comes the strong force, weak force, electromagnetism, and gravity. The primordial egg is where all life emerges. Let us explore the most African-centered beliefs around this cosmology of creation and existence in reference to the primordial waters. They also speak of Oyigi Yigi among the Yorubas and Ama's egg among the Dogon, which has very similar story about the egg divided into 4 segments and eventually into 16 and 256 and so forth. It's something that I think people will enjoy looking into. We talked about how they also spoke of the mathematics of creation. But getting back into the subject of water, because that's the subject for another video. Among the Yoruba, Yemoja means the mother of the fish. The fish swim in what is called schools. So in this regard, humanity are the fish. This life is our education as long as we're on earth. So as long as you're on earth, you are in school. We are all Yemoja's children. And we're all connected to the energetic flow of life. In fact, the atmosphere in which we thrive still contains water. So in so many words, we're still underwater. And you think I'm lying? Science have actually found water in space. And science actually found a huge cloud of vapor about 12 million light years away. According to the Dogon, which come with a lot of wisdom with this teaching, they were taught by the ancestors, by even more ancient beings called Nomo. The Nomo are said to have been fish-like and amphibious. These beings needed to thrive in a watery environment, and the Nomo are referred to as the teachers and monitors of humanity. Both the Dogon and the Yoruba recognize that creation came from a single point. The Dogon speak about an egg or a rock that divided itself into 4 parts, and within this egg or this rock contains the ingredients of creation. The Dogon understood this to be 256 of 266 signs, and for the Yoruba, it is also 256. This is the visions of the cosmic egg or the stone, in which reflects the divination system of Ifa in the Yoruba tradition. The Dogon spoke of how Ama made his first attempt to create the universe but failed because his attempt to make love to the earth. Because of his violation, the earth gave birth to a jackal, which brought chaos and disorder into the world. In a later attempt, Ama created the perfect twins known as the Nomo. The Nomo were being described as amphibious and without joints. So there's a book called Conversations with Ogotomile, and we see that he was actually using the word nomo and water interchangeably. And he talks about the various essence of life and about water being the gate of creation, as well as being the blood of the earth itself. Water is also known as the sacred word of creation according to the Dogon. Nomo also takes the form of an amphibious fish or a fish-like being called Nomosimi. The story goes on to tell us a very familiar story, yet bizarre, that in order to correct the flaw in creation by Ama, there had to be a sacrifice of a fish man known as Nomosimbi, and his sacrifice is to have his flesh devoured, and then his bones are thrown back into the water, and where 3 days later he is resurrected. In African tradition, we begin to understand that water spirits are considered to be extremely powerful. But what is it about this element that is so mysterious and considered so powerful? The Egyptian wisdom keeper by the name of Hakim, who is the mentor of Stephen Myler, stressed that the 18th Egyptian dynasty functioned with the use of water. It relied heavily upon water. We understand about the importance of the Nile River and its annual flooding. However, it is believed that there was something more even interesting than that, which is why the pyramid itself was built, often surrounded by water. The Great Pyramid symbolizes the primordial hill, which is echoed in what is called the Bin stone. And this Bin stone is placed on the top of obelisk as well as the pyramid. In fact, the Bin stone is shaped like a small pyramid. We will look at the hieroglyphic writing system called the Metal Netter, and we see a glyph that is shaped like water. It's a water wave. But this water wave also represents more than one thing. Not only the flow of water, but also energy itself. Now think about that. They understood water and identified water with energy. Okay? And that's the N sound in the hieroglyphic language. A few examples of this is the word Nefer, the word Neter, Amin Ra, and Unk. Nefer, according to Abdul Hakim, what he told Stephen Myler, is a set of glyphs arranged to spell out Askat Nefer. Askat Nefer was the life-giving waters of harmony, and the Cometians understood that water was the source of creation and that water contains memory. And interestingly enough, the Hebrew word for water is the letter Mem. When we look at the hieroglyphs that make up the word, we see a water wave which makes the inside and out of the placenta, which makes the k sound. So you see the water wave was and you see k, right, which is the placenta. That's the KH sound. So when you actually spell Unk, it's actually spelled NKH, right? Now, another thing, we look at Amma's egg, right? We see that it also is attached to the center of the creation, or beginning of creation. The teachings of the Dogon says that the sun is actually the stolen placenta of Ogo, which were ripped from the womb of creation. And it's said that the jackal stole this center and began to create with it. But because of the nature of this birth, because the jackal came into corruption, all he was able to do was spread disorder and chaos throughout the cosmos. The placenta itself was considered the first mother of a child developing in the womb. The Hopi Indians speak about water being the element of those who are known as black people, melanated people, right? Interestingly enough, they go on to say that black people forgot that was our assignment to be the masters of water. And if you look into West African tradition, we see how much it is revered. There's a song actually by Fela Kuti, and it's called Water No Get Enemy. And remember, in the Yoruba scriptures, like I spoke earlier, of Ofun Bile, also known as Ofun Erete. All right. It says, Ofun Erete was divine for Omi, water, who was told to make sacrifice. And it tells you what the sacrifice was. And it talks about Ofun Bile, water, having victory over his enemies. It says, one who sets oneself up as an enemy to water will die prematurely. Now, water is beneficial for survival, and water also is the elements making up our world and our physical existence. It's the most abundant. 71% of the planet is made up of water, which is the same in the human body, meaning that it was our duty to take care of this planet. The father of the so-called black race is the sun. The mother, the black race, would definitely be the water. We will see that water plays a very important role in many of our African traditions, such as libation and for initiation that requires the initiate being immersed in water. Sounds familiar? Now, this is the origin of the Christian church called baptism, and it is believed that baptism is a rebirth, the washing away of one's sins, where when you basically remove all the impurities of the former self, a new self is born. Interesting enough, the symbol of Christ is the fish, right? So water is utilized in the first ritual purification, the first baptism, as well as the first cleansing of the planet was with water, just as it said that the second baptism is by fire. This would also include the cleansing of the planet, as well as the baptism of the individual, where they say your first baptism is by water and your second baptism is by fire. So the feeling of being new. Research is helping human beings to overcome the ignorance about what water is and its renewing, refreshing powers. The human race is to remember something very ancient. The fact that since we are composed of water, mostly, and that water holds memory, it also holds intent as well as feeling. Just as we spoke about previously in the Kemetic tradition, Amun-Ra, the power of the sacred breath. I talked about this in another video, and how it talks about the extending and contracting of the DNA molecules based on one's mood. Like, for instance, when one was in a joyful mood, let's say you're in a joyful mood, your DNA actually extends. However, when you are in a negative mood, your DNA actually contracts. At the same time, your body is also storing the memories of these events. So we understand that our bodies are mostly water, then it would make sense why we would want to have more uplifting thoughts. Because whenever we continue to think and speak negative or to be in a toxic and negative environment, then information bonds itself with the waters of our physical body temple, and we have feelings of depression. It is good to focus on the areas of the lungs and make a hissing sound. I'll share it with you. Just simply focus on the lungs. Go and visualize the color white. Visualize white around you and around your lungs. And you say, this sound actually helps to get rid of depression, which also is connected to the lungs. I don't know if anybody is familiar with the works of Montauk Chia, but you might want to check out a book called The Five Healing Sounds by Montauk Chia. But anyway, this allows us to take deeper breaths where we oxygenate the blood, which in turn brings more life to our brains, our blood vessels, our arteries. They're much like the Niger River or the Nile River, in which we wish to cleanse and purify. It would behoove us to purify ourselves both inwardly and outwardly, respecting the forces of Yemoja and Olokun within our being. Remember, water is 1% hydrogen, 2 parts oxygen. Did I say percent? I meant to say 1 part hydrogen, 2 parts oxygen. Hydrogen is the primary element on the periodic table, the number one element in which all other elements are variants of. In certain cultures, it is taught that water amplifies our prayers. In fact, it is not even good to argue around water, because eventually you're going to drink this water. And the fact that this water will contain the negative vibrations. So due to the fact that this water has these negative vibrations, it will soon create disease and illness in one's body. According to homeopathy, as well as the Indian system, Ayurveda, when a plant or a stone is placed in a container of water, the water will take on the information of the plant or the stone, and therefore the water can be drained, and the person will consume the properties by drinking the water. Normal is water and the word at the same time. Some have translated normal to mean that which can be drained. So we look more into that. We see that normal is also identified with air as well as water in the form of the spoken word. So normal is also the word. The character known as Jesus the Christ talks about how one must be born of water and spirit. It's observed that one can enter into the heavenly kingdom only when they have been born of water and spirit. Water is necessary for carbon-based beings, water being linked to spirit. The character known as Jesus Christ says that one can only enter the heavenly kingdom by being reborn. Water is necessary for all carbon-based life to exist, and spirit comes from the Latin word meaning breath, spiritus. So there's a book written by a man by the name of Greg Braden. The book is called The Divine Matrix. And what he is basically saying is that we actually do live within the matrix. However, we have the ability to create a desired outcome through a feeling. Prayer is a feeling. And when you put feeling behind your prayers, things manifest. The universe is the voice activated place that we call the matrix. Yes, the universe is voice activated, and so is your DNA. So words and intent via prayer can be imprinted onto the water in which we drink and bathe in. Water is liquid hardware, you see. So when you speak good things into a cup of water and sprinkle it, this is called libation, and has been practiced throughout Africa for thousands of years. So when we find walls of Kemet, we see the Kemetic priests pouring out libations to their ancestors. And so it is today in the remaining and surviving African traditions. Remember, again, we are 71% water, and water amplifies prayer. But just like any form of water, in order to be clear, it has to go through a process of purification. So therefore, we must also put ourselves in environments that will elevate our consciousness and our emotional wellness. It is healthy to go near rivers, lakes, and streams. These locations and habits are rich in negative ions. And because of disagreeable thoughts based on shame, guilt, revenge, haterism, we create problems within our own lives. The Dogon would actually say that illness in our lives is directly linked to the wrong words. So we have to be careful of the very words in which we speak. We have to be careful of not only what we say about others, but also about ourselves to ourselves. The words that we use have a direct effect on the water in our bodies. Remember, your brain is also 80% water. So you're basically holding all these things in your very being. The things we say out loud has an impact on the water within our bodies. Now, this was also something that was talked about in the works of Dr. Masaru Emoto, who was attempting to prove that through his experiments. Some of his experiments involved sticking words on rice jars. He used 3 jars of rice, one with love, one with hate, and one that was simply ignored. Unfortunately, since he is not considered legitimate, science in the scientific community says that he is a pseudo. However, there's been other experiments, and people have tried his experiments and have had very positive results. So whether his experiments are considered legitimate or not, I do believe that Dr. Masaru Emoto was onto something. Remember that water is the only element that can go from a solid to a liquid to a gas, and it can also do this process in reverse. Water can fit in a container, right, and get the form of the container and yet remain itself. Now there's the Hebrew letter I spoke of earlier, mem, right? Water is called mem. Water holds memory. The DNA holds memory. Your whole being is a memory, accumulating even more memory. You embody the waters of eternity. Memory of our ancestors have been passed on to us, not only a rich history, but also the pain and fears that exist within our DNA as genetic memory. Unfortunately, many of times people tend to repeat patterns that are unhealthy, patterns of situations and behaviors inherited from their ancestors. Some results from colonization, slavery, and poverty vows that have been passed down to us from generation to generation. Now, the elites know this, and they tend to be selective of who they marry and have children with. So when working with the ancestors, the purpose is to tap into the productive ancestral memory patterns and transcend these patterns that have kept us stagnant. We must transcend their suffering, so we will stop living it and passing it on. It is said that when the devotees of Yemoja were captured and put on the slave ships, Yemoja came with them. Yemoja is one of the most popular and beloved of the Orishas. Her worship originated around Abeokuta, the capital of Ogun State. Her sacred river starts in Oyo and ends in Lagos. The Ogun River is the largest river in Yoruba land. Yemoja means the mother of fish. In the diaspora, she is the upper layer of the waters of the sea, and she is believed to be the other half of Olokun. In Nigeria, she is the spirit of the Ogun River. Yemoja is said to be the mother of the living, and since all children are her children, she offers to protect us all. Her colors are blue and white, and when she dances with her skirts, it looks like waves moving across the water. Her number is 7. She has 7 skirts and represents the 7 seas, and one of her favorite foods is molasses, and she also takes white wine occasionally, melons and coconut, amongst other things. She often can take the form of a mermaid and is identified with the moon. Now, she is the personification of the one thing needed to nurture humanity, and that is care. When something is cared for, it grows strong. We are able to manifest a stronger outcome when we care for whatever it is that we focus upon. Yemoja reminds us the need for care in the world, its role in our development, as well as its use in us refining ourselves. Yemoja is the protector of children and the mystery of motherhood. Yemoja often adopts those who do not get the nurturing essential to their development as children. She is fierce when it comes to protecting her children, and she is slow to anger, but when she does get angry, her wrath can be terrible. So staying on her good side is highly advised. Our Lady of Regla in Cuba is identified with Yemoja. Okay, so just a little bit of extra factoids. So we pollute the oceans. We sicken the planet and ourselves. Our planet has been sickened. Humanity has a choice, and it's the decision we make now that will determine how things will go into effect. Generations from now. In a couple of years ago, in 2020, it was reported through studies that sea levels was rising 3.6 inches above the level they were in 1993. Ifa teaches us that the Creator made a covenant with water, therefore it serves to pray with water. It serves to protect water. We have a responsibility on this planet to make sure that everything stays balanced, including ourselves. When we develop that respect for water, we have a respect for selves, as well as a great mother principle. So with that, I leave you. My name is Kepra Bata, also known as Falowo Fayemi Adeshayo Opanyamin. If you're interested in having a consultation to see who your Orishas are or what your destiny is, feel free to contact me at 206-960-7999. And I can also be reached at kepra.pata@gmail.com. That's KHEPRA.PTAH.com. Till then, peace and blessings. Adabo.